The first thing she noticed was the sound. A hush, a sudden withdrawal of noise, as if a wave had pulled back from the shore, leaving only the wet, exposed sand. Chloe felt it as a physical pressure against her skin. Every head in the opulent dining room of the Gilded Orchid turned. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died in mid-sentence. And then came the second sound, the one that followed the silence. A faint, electronic chime, then another and another. The tiny red lights of smartphones, blinking in the dim, luxurious light like malevolent fireflies. They were recording her. Her, in her dark green dress, the one she had spent 2 weeks of tips to afford, the one she thought made her look elegant. She was a 25-year-old single mother, and she was fat. In a room built for whispers and skeletons, she was a shout. Her body, full and soft and unapologetically present, was an intrusion. She kept her chin up, a lesson her grandmother had drilled into her since she was a little girl. You walk into a room, you own the floor you stand on. Don't you ever let them make you feel small, but it was hard when the air itself seemed to shrink away from you. She could feel the weight of their judgment, 100 tiny anchors pulling at the fabric of her dress, at the composure she fought so hard to maintain. Her gaze swept past the tables of gawking strangers, searching for the man she was supposed to meet. And then she saw him. He was seated at the most secluded table in the restaurant, a corner booth upholstered in dark velvet, half shrouded in shadow. He was not looking at the spectacle she was causing. He was looking only at her. His stillness was absolute, a pool of deep, calm water in the middle of a storm. He made no move, his hands resting on the table, his posture unnervingly relaxed. But his eyes, dark and intelligent, tracked her every step as she navigated the minefield of stares and whispers. What she did not know was that this entire scene was a calculated insult, a meticulously planned humiliation. But it was not meant for her. It was meant for him. We are so glad you found the story. Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and join our community. We have so many more stories to share with you. Now, let us get back to it. The man's name was Minjun, and the world he moved in was far removed from Chloe's life of balancing rent, childcare, and night shifts. He was the head of a powerful syndicate, a man whose name was spoken in hushed tones in rooms she could never imagine. The blind date had been arranged by one of his underlings, a man named Mr. Park, who believed his leader was growing soft, too detached. Park had chosen Chloe specifically, scrolling through dating profiles until he found what he considered the perfect weapon, a woman whose appearance would, in his small mind, be a public embarrassment to a man like Minjun. He envisioned Minjun storming out, the woman left in tears, a lesson in public perception delivered. Park had gravely underestimated his boss. As Chloe reached the table, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, Minjun rose to his feet. It was not a sudden movement, but a smooth, deliberate unfolding. He was taller than she had expected, dressed in a suit so perfectly tailored it seemed a part of him. He pulled out her chair, a gesture of old-world courtesy, so at odds with the modern cruelty of the room that it momentarily stunned her into silence. "Miss Evans?" he asked. His voice was low, a quiet baritone with no discernible accent, yet it carried an authority that cut through the lingering whispers. She finally found her own voice, though it felt thin and reedy.
"Yes."
"Chloe," he inclined his head slightly. "Mignon." "Please," she sat, the velvet of the booth soft against her back. He did not resume his seat immediately, but waited until she was settled, his gaze sweeping the room once. It was not a glare. It was something colder, a quiet assessment that made the few people still holding up their phones slowly lower them, a sudden chill of self-preservation dousing their desire for spectacle. The silence in the room was now one of respect, or perhaps fear. When he finally sat opposite her, the world seemed to shrink to the space of their small table. "They are rude," he said, his voice a simple statement of fact. It was not an apology. It was a verdict. Chloe smoothed a non-existent wrinkle in her dress. "I'm used to it." His eyes held hers, and for the first time, she felt seen, not just looked at. "Being used to a thing does not make it right." A waiter appeared, trembling almost imperceptibly, setting down 2 glasses of water. Minjun did not look at him, but addressed Chloe. Do you have a preference? Wine. She shook her head. Water is fine. Thank you. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the waiter, who scurried away as if released from a trap. The menus lay on the table, heavy leather-bound books. Minjun made no move to open his. Instead, his gaze dropped for a fraction of a second to the delicate silver chain around her neck. A small, simple locket rested there. That is a beautiful piece, he said. Is it old? Chloe's hand instinctively went to it, her thumb rubbing the worn surface. Inside was a tiny, folded picture of her daughter, Lily, all gap-toothed smile and bright eyes. It was my mother's, she said, the words coming out more easily now. She gave it to me when Lily was born. He did not ask who Lily was. It was as if he already knew or understood that the name held a universe of meaning for her. Family is important, he stated, his eyes meeting hers again. It is the only thing that is real. The quiet intensity of his focus was unnerving. He was not looking at her body, at her dress, at the color of her skin. He was looking at her, at the person sitting across from him, and in that moment, Chloe felt a profound and unfamiliar sense of calm settle over her. The rest of the room, with its judgment and its cruelty, simply faded away. He had built a wall of silence around their table, and inside it, for the first time all night, she felt she could breathe. The head waiter, a man with a perpetually worried expression, approached their table, bowing low. Mr. Kim, my sincerest apologies for the disturbance. If there is anything at all we can do, Minjun raised a hand, a gesture no bigger than a twitch, and the man fell silent. Bring us the sea base. And a bottle of your best Chardonnay, Minjun said, his voice never rising above a quiet command. Then, he looked at Chloe. Unless you would prefer something else? She was taken aback by this simple courtesy. The sea base sounds wonderful, she managed. He nodded, and the waiter vanished. The next day, the memory of the dinner felt like a strange, vivid dream. Chloe stood in her small, sun-filled kitchen, making pancakes for her daughter, Lily. The apartment was modest, filled with second-hand furniture and the bright, chaotic artwork of a 7-year-old. It was her sanctuary, a world away from the cold marble and hushed judgment of the gilded orchid. Lily, her hair in 2 puffy pigtails, sat at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs and chattering about a dream she'd had involving a talking squirrel. And he said, Lily, you have to share your nuts. But I didn't have any nuts, Mommy, just my crayons. Chloe laughed, flipping a pancake. Well, you should never give a squirrel your crayons, sweetie. They can't draw with them. This was her reality. The smell of syrup, the warmth of the morning sun, the sound of her daughter's laughter. Last night felt like it had happened to someone else. The way Minjun had looked at her, the way he had silenced an entire room with a glance. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. He had spoken very little about himself, asking her questions instead. He'd asked about her job as a library assistant, about the books she loved, about what it was like to grow up in the city. He listened with an unnerving stillness, his focus absolute. He never once mentioned the scene at the start of the evening. He had simply erased it. Did you have fun last night, Mommy? Lily asked, her mouth full of pancake. Chloe paused, the spatula in her hand. How could she explain it? It was interesting, baby. Was he handsome? Like the prince in the stories? Chloe thought of his face. Not handsome in a conventional way. His features were sharp, intelligent, his expression a mask of control. But there was a power in his stillness, an undeniable presence. He was very serious, she said finally. She had come home and checked her phone, half dreading what she would find. A friend had sent her a link. A short, shaky video of her walking into the restaurant was already circulating on a local gossip site. The comments were a predictable river of poison. She had closed the browser, her stomach twisting. But then she remembered the look on Minjun's face. Not pity, not disgust, just a calm, steady regard. He had treated her like a queen in a room full of people treating her like a joke. That was the part that made no sense. That was the part that kept replaying in her mind, a mystery she couldn't solve. Miles away, in a minimalist office overlooking the city from the top floor of a skyscraper, Minjun sat across from Mr. Park. The air was cold. Park was sweating, though he tried to hide it, dabbing at his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He had expected a furious phone call last night. He had expected a public dismissal this morning. This quiet, controlled summons was far worse. Minjun had not spoken since Park had entered the room 10 minutes ago. He simply sat, looking at the man who had tried to humiliate him. Finally, he spoke, his voice dangerously soft. "You believe I am weak, Mr. Park." It was not a question. Park's eyes widened. "No, sir. Never. It was a mistake, a misjudgment by the agency I used." Minjun raised a hand, and Park's rambling apology died in his throat. "You believe my grandfather's final wishes have made me sentimental. You believe that my desire for quiet is a flaw to be corrected. So you arranged a test. A public spectacle." He leaned forward slightly, and the menace in the room became a palpable force. "You chose a woman you thought was beneath me. A woman you believed would be an object of ridicule. You wanted to see me react. To remind me of the world's ugliness." Park could barely breathe. "Sir, her name is Chloe Evans," Minjun continued, his voice dropping even lower. "She is a mother. She works at the public library. She endures the judgment of small men like you every single day, and she does so with a dignity you will never comprehend." He stood up and walked to the vast window, his back to Park. "You did not embarrass me, Mr. Park. You revealed yourself. Your contract is terminated. Your shares in the logistics firm will be liquidated, and the funds transferred to an account I have opened." He turned back, his face a mask of cold granite. "The account is in the name of the downtown public library, for their children's literacy program." "You are dismissed." Park stared, his face pale with shock. It was a ruinous punishment, delivered without a single raised voice. As the broken man was escorted out by 2 silent guards, Minjun's most trusted lieutenant, an older man named Mr. Choi, stepped into the room. The rival family, the Cheons, had a man at the restaurant last night. Choi reported quietly. He observed the entire evening. "They will see her as a weakness." Minjun's gaze was fixed on the city below. "Then they will learn, as Mr. Park just learned, that what they see as a weakness is, in fact, a strength. Have someone watch her. From a distance. She is not to be disturbed, and she is not to be harmed." 2 days later, Chloe was shelving books in the children's section of the library when she saw him. Minjun was standing near the fairy tale aisle, looking entirely out of place in his perfectly tailored gray suit. He was holding a copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. For a moment, she thought she had imagined him, a ghost from her strange dream. But then he looked up, and his eyes met hers across the brightly colored room. A few patrons glanced at him, noting the expensive suit, the air of quiet authority, but then returned to their books, oblivious. He walked towards her, moving with that same deliberate grace. "Miss Evans," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet library. "Chloe, please," she corrected, her heart starting to beat a little faster. What are you doing here?" He held up the book. "I was told this is a classic." His expression was unreadable. She couldn't tell if he was being serious or making a joke. "It is," she said. "It's about becoming real through love." He considered that for a moment, his gaze unwavering. A worthy subject, an awkward silence fell between them. She clutched a stack of Dr. Seuss books to her chest like a shield. "Was there something you needed?" He reached into his suit pocket and produced a small, silver object. Her locket. "You left this on the table," he said. She gasped, her hand flying to her neck, feeling the bare skin where it should have been. She hadn't even noticed it was gone. "Oh, my gosh. Thank you. I thought I'd lost it forever." She reached for it, but he didn't hand it to her immediately. "May I?" he asked, his eyes asking for permission. She nodded, confused, and turned slightly. His fingers, cool and steady, brushed the back of her neck as he fastened the delicate clasp. The brief touch sent a shiver through her. It was the most intimate gesture she had experienced in years. Just then, a small voice piped up from the end of the aisle. "Mommy? Who's that?" Lily stood there, holding a picture book, her eyes wide with curiosity. She was looking at Minjun. Chloe's breath caught. Lily, baby, this is Mr. Kim. Minjun turned his attention to the little girl. The formidable, unreadable man seemed to soften in an instant. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. The movement was so unexpected, so natural, it took Chloe's breath away. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "It is a pleasure to meet you." Lily, who is usually shy around strangers, took a step forward. "Are you the serious man?" she asked. A flicker of something amusement, perhaps, crossed Minjun's face. "I suppose I am," he said. "Your mother told you about me?" Lily nodded solemnly. "She said you were interesting." Minjun looked up at Chloe, a silent question in his eyes. For the first time, she saw a crack in his armor of perfect control, a hint of genuine human curiosity. In that moment, surrounded by stories of dragons and princesses, Chloe felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The mystery of this man was only getting deeper. The Cheon family did not deal in subtlety. Their leader, a brutish man named Cheon Taewoo, saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. A powerful rival developing a personal attachment to a civilian woman, an outsider, was a liability he could exploit. His first move was not violent. It was designed to be insidious, to poison the well. Two men, dressed in nondescript business attire, approached Chloe a week later as she was leaving work. They cornered her just out of sight of the library's main entrance, their smiles thin and predatory. "Miss Evans," the first one said. "We have a proposition for you." Chloe clutched her bag, her instincts screaming. These were not good men. "I'm sorry, I have to pick up my daughter," she said, trying to step around them. The second man blocked her path. "This will only take a moment. We represent a group of concerned citizens. We know who you had dinner with last week. A man like that, he's dangerous. He brings trouble." The first man opened a briefcase. It was filled with neat stacks of cash. "We want to help you. Enough here for you and your little girl to disappear. Start a new life somewhere safe." Far away from him, Chloe stared at the money, then back at their faces. It was more money than she had ever seen. A way out of debt, a down payment on a small house, a future for Lily free from worry. All she had to do was walk away. Or, they implied, give them something useful. Information on his habits, his schedule. Anything. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "Just your cooperation," the man said smoothly. "Help us and we help you. Refuse, well, it would be a shame if the trouble he carries were to spill over into your life. Little girls can be so fragile." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but crystal clear. Chloe thought of Minjun, crouching down to speak to Lily. She thought of his quiet courtesy, the way he had built a fortress of dignity around her in that restaurant. He had been kind to her when the world was cruel. He had looked at her and seen a person, not a punchline. Something inside her solidified, turning from fear into a cold, hard resolve. She looked the man dead in the eye. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but it was absolute. "I'm not interested." The man's smile vanished. "That is a very foolish decision, Miss Evans." Chloe lifted her chin. "He was kind to me when no one else was," she said, her voice ringing with a conviction that surprised even herself. "I will not betray that. Now, if you'll excuse me, my daughter is waiting." She pushed past them, not running, but walking with a deliberate, steady pace, her back straight, never once looking back. She did not see the black car parked across the street, or the grim-faced man inside speaking quietly into a phone, reporting every word she had just said. The call came 2 days later. It was a restricted number. A man's voice, rough and distorted, spoke a single sentence. "Stay away from the school playground today." Then the line went dead. Chloe's blood ran cold. She immediately called the school, her voice trembling, and told them Lily was sick and that she was coming to get her. The 20-minute drive felt like an eternity. Every car that followed too closely, every shadow in an alley, seemed like a threat. She found Lily in the nurse's office, perfectly fine, complaining of a phantom stomach ache. As they walked out of the school, hand in hand, Chloe's eyes scanned the street, the park across the road, every face. She saw nothing out of the ordinary, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. As they approached her apartment building, a beat-up van that had been parked across the street suddenly screeched to life, its tires smoking as it sped directly towards them. Chloe reacted on pure instinct. She shoved Lily behind her, shielding her with her own body, bracing for the impact. But it never came. A sleek black sedan, appearing from nowhere, shot out of an alley and slammed into the side of the van with a deafening crunch of metal. The van was thrown sideways, crashing into a lamppost. Two men in dark suits emerged from the sedan, moving with frightening speed and efficiency. They wrenched open the van's doors and dragged two dazed men out onto the pavement. It was over in less than 30 seconds. Then, another car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened and Minjun got out. The mask of calm was gone. His face was a thundercloud of cold, controlled fury. He ignored the scene of the crash, his eyes fixed only on Chloe and Lily. He strode towards them, his long coat billowing behind him. He knelt in front of Lily, who was crying, terrified. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice tight with a raw emotion Chloe had never heard before. Lily shook her head, burying her face in her mother's coat. He looked at Chloe, and in his eyes, she saw a darkness that chilled her to the bone, but it was a darkness aimed not at her, but at the world that had dared to threaten her. "They will not touch you again," he vowed. It was not a reassurance. It was a sentence being passed. He stood up. "You are not safe here anymore. You and Lily will come with me." It was not a request. He was taking control, pulling them into the shelter of his dangerous world, the only place he could guarantee their safety. He took them to a penthouse apartment high above the city, a place of glass and steel and breathtaking views. It was silent, sterile, and felt as far from her cozy, cluttered home as the moon. Lily, exhausted and scared, fell asleep almost immediately in a bedroom that was bigger than their entire living room. Chloe stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, wrapping her arms around herself, watching the city lights twinkle below. She felt like she was in a cage, albeit a beautiful one. Minjun entered the room, holding 2 glasses of water. He handed one to her. "She is safe here," he said. "No one can reach you." "For how long?" Chloe asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" He was silent for a long time, his gaze also on the city. The fury had receded, replaced by a deep, weary gravity. He looked tired. "Here is the part of the story nobody saw coming. That night at the restaurant," he began, his voice low. "It was not a coincidence." Not entirely, he turned to face her, his expression serious. "The date was arranged by a man who wished to insult me. But I accepted the invitation for a different reason. It was a promise he told her about his grandfather, the old patriarch of the family, a man forged in a harder, more brutal time. In his final years, the old man had grown reflective, haunted by the violence of his life. He had urged Minjun to find a different path, to find a foundation for his life outside of their world. "He told me to find someone with a true heart," Minjun said. "Someone whose strength was not in violence or power, but in character. He said a person like that could anchor me, keep me from being lost to the darkness." One afternoon, months before he died, his grandfather had been sitting in his car, stuck in traffic. He saw a young woman helping an elderly man who had fallen on the sidewalk. She had knelt on the dirty pavement, patiently helping him up, picking up his spilled groceries, speaking to him with a gentle kindness that was oblivious to the impatient city around them. That woman was Chloe. The old man had pointed her out to his most trusted aide, Mr. Choi. "See there," he had said. "That is substance. That is real." After his grandfather's death, Choi had told Minjun the story. So when Mr. Park, in his petty attempt at an insult, had presented him with a picture of Chloe Evans for a blind date, Minjun had recognized her immediately. "I went to that dinner expecting to be disappointed," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "I expected to find that my grandfather's sentimentality had clouded his judgment. I did not expect to find he was right." A new understanding settled over Chloe, rearranging every piece of the puzzle. The way he had looked at her, the instant respect, the quiet protection. It wasn't random. It was a search. He had been looking for something, and against all odds, he believed he had found it in her. In the weeks that followed, the penthouse became less of a cage and more of a sanctuary. Minjun's presence was a constant, quiet shield. He worked from an office in the apartment, and while his days were filled with hushed, intense phone calls and meetings with Mr. Choi, his evenings were for them. He would sit with Lily, helping her with her homework, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to understand 7-year-old math. He listened with solemn patience as she read to him from her favorite books. He never spoke down to her. He treated her questions with the same seriousness he gave to his business dealings. He and Chloe would talk late into the night, after Lily was asleep. She told him about her dreams of opening a small children's bookstore one day. He told her about the crushing weight of his family's legacy, the responsibility he carried. He never glorified his world, nor did he apologize for it. He simply presented it as his reality, a dangerous inheritance he was trying to manage with some semblance of honor. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, the city a tapestry of light at their feet, he turned to her. "The men who threatened you," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "The Cheon family. They will no longer be a problem." She understood the finality in his tone. He had ended the threat, completely and irrevocably. A war she never knew had been fought, and won on her behalf. "You and Lily are free to go back to your old life, if that is what you wish," he said, though a tension in his shoulders betrayed his carefully neutral words. "You will be protected. Always. But you do not have to stay here." Chloe looked at him, at this powerful, dangerous, and profoundly lonely man. She thought of her old life, the constant struggle, the quiet dismissals, the daily fight for dignity. Here, in this strange gilded tower, she had found a safety and a respect she had never known. She had found a man who saw her, truly saw her. She reached out and placed her hand on his. "What if this is our life now?" she asked softly. His gaze locked with hers, and in the depths of his dark eyes, she saw the walls of his control finally, completely, fall away, revealing a raw, aching vulnerability. He brought her hand to his lips, his touch gentle. "I had hoped you would say that," he whispered. In the end, it was not about a mafia boss and a single mother. It was about a man who had been taught to value power, finding a woman who had mastered strength, and a woman who had always been overlooked finally being seen by the one person who mattered. Together, they built a new kind of family, an unlikely fortress of love and loyalty high above a city that could no longer touch them. I read every single one of your comments and love hearing what you think. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and tell us in the comments what you thought of Minjun's promise. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. We will see you in the next story.